The hooter goes at 12. 300 men put down their tools at exactly the same second and move toward the same place, down the same corridor, through the same double doors, past the same woman who has been standing behind that counter since 1962 and who knows every man's order without being asked. 3 things on this list are going to stop you. Number 12 was served in over 4,000 British works canteens every single Thursday in 1973 for 18 pence and has not appeared on a single works canteen menu since the last major factory closures of the 1980s. Number 7 was so universally associated with the Friday canteen that the smell of it alone coming down the corridor told an entire workforce what day it was without looking at a clock. And number 1, the works canteen meal that kept more British factory workers going than any other throughout the entire 1970s, is the one your generation queued for without thinking, and the generation after yours has never once eaten from a canteen tray. These are 15 British works canteen meals that kept the nation going in the 1970s. And if you ever picked up a tray in a place like that, this one is for you. Number 15, Oxtail Soup with the bread, not from a tin, not Heinz, made in your canteen kitchen from actual oxtail that had been simmering since 6 in the morning in a stock pot the size of a dustbin, the bones giving everything they had to the liquid over 6 hours, so that by noon what came out of that pot was dark and thick and deeply savoury in a way that no commercial soup product has ever replicated, ladled into a thick white bowl, a slice of white bread on the side. Not a roll, a slice cut thick from the loaves, delivered that morning, and that was the starter, the warm-up. The thing that told your body the meal was beginning. In the Midlands Engineering Works in 1972, Lucas, Rover, GKN Dunlop, Oxtail Soup was on the canteen menu every Monday. 18 pence for the soup, bread included. The oxtail had cost the canteen perhaps 2 shillings a pound, and one large batch fed 200 men. The economics were extraordinary. It vanished. When the canteen system vanished, when the works closed and the outsourced catering arrived, and the outsourced catering served Heinz from a tin heated to the correct temperature by a process that complied with every relevant food safety standard and tasted of absolutely nothing your generation would recognize. But the soup was just the warm-up. The main courses are where this list gets serious. Number 14, Mince and Dumplings. The mince first, not premium. Mince, beef mince, the cheap grade, the kind with a higher fat content than the supermarket would now consider acceptable, browned, in batches in the largest pans the kitchen had, and then combined with onion that had been sweating since 10 o'clock, and a dark brown gravy made from beef stock and a spoonful of Marmite and left to simmer until it was thick and intensely savoury, and the kitchen smelled like something your grandmother would have made. The dumplings on top, sweat and flour and salt and water rolled into balls, dropped into the mince for the last 20 minutes of cooking, swelling as they absorbed the gravy until they were twice their original size, and glossy on the outside and soft and dense inside. In the textile mills of West Yorkshire in 1971, Bradford, Halifax, Huddersfield, Mince and Dumplings was Tuesday. Not sometimes. Tuesday. Always Tuesday. The canteen women made it because they knew the men would eat every last piece of it and leave the tray clean and not complain about anything if Mince and Dumplings was on. The sweat dumpling requires patience. It requires someone who knows when they are done without looking at a clock, who can tell from the sound and the smell and the slight change in texture when the gravy reaches them through the dough. That specific knowledge does not transfer to a reheated catering unit, which is why Mince and Dumplings died when the women who made it retired and the system that employed them closed. We are at number 14. The meals get more specific from here, and number 11 is the one that will stop people who worked in a British factory in the 1970s cold. Number 13, Spotted Dick and Custard. The pudding came first in the queue, psychologically. You looked at the pudding counter before you looked at the hot plate, because the pudding told you whether it was going to be a good day. Spotted Dick, a sweat sponge with currents distributed through it. Spots steamed in a long cloth until it was completely cooked through and dense and just sweet enough without being confectionery. Served in a thick slice, custard from a jug poured over the top at the table by the canteen woman, who came round with the jug and poured until you, said Wen. In the steel works of Sheffield and Rotherham, in 1973, Spotted Dick and Custard was the Wednesday. A pudding, 20p including the custard. The slice was generous. Because the canteen was not a profit centre, it was a welfare provision, understood by both management and union as a part of the unwritten compact between the company and its workforce. That unwritten compact was the thing that has never been replaced. The works canteen was not Pret. It was not a revenue opportunity. It was the acknowledgement that men who did physical labour for 8 hours deserved a hot meal at noon that was substantial and honest, and did not cost them more than they could afford. When that compact ended, the pudding went with it. Number 12, liver and bacon with onion gravy. This is the one. 4,000 canteens, 18p, every Thursday. 1973, ox liver, not lamb's liver, ox liver, the stronger flavoured, cheaper per pound variety that takes more cooking but rewards the patients with more depth, sliced thick, dusted in. Seasoned flour, fried in the canteen's industrial pans until just cooked through. Alongside it, bacon, back bacon, 2 rashers, grilled until the fat had crisped, and over everything, onion gravy made from the drippings in the pan with sliced onions that had been cooked down until they were almost caramelized, and a stock that had been going since morning, with mashed potato, real mash, not reconstituted powder, actual potato boiled and mashed with milk. And a block of margarine and beaten until smooth by. Whoever had that job that morning, the reason liver and bacon on Thursday was so universal across British works. Canteens in the early 1970s was price. Ox liver at 18p a pound in 1972 was the cheapest substantial protein available to a canteen buyer. It allowed the canteen to serve a proper meat-based main course within a budget that kept the full plate at 18p. Food safety regulations tightening through the mid-1970s made liver more expensive and more complicated to handle in a commercial kitchen. The price went up, the margin disappeared. The canteens switched to something easier and cheaper, and the liver and bacon Thursday disappeared from 4,000 menus simultaneously across the country, and nobody wrote about it. And nobody mourned it officially because it was just canteen. Food and canteen food was not the kind of thing anyone wrote about. We haven't reached the top 10 yet, and the meals from here are the ones. Number 11, steak and kidney pudding. Individual basins, that was the key detail. Not a sharing dish, not a portion cut from a larger version. Individual basins, the small white ones, slightly tapered at the top, each one containing a single portion of sweet pastry casing, filled with diced beef and kidney in a dark, intensely reduced gravy. Steamed for 3 hours from 8 in the morning in a bank of steamers. Steamed for 3 hours from 8 in the morning in a bank of steamers that took up an entire wall of the canteen kitchen. A brief moment of tension as the sweet crust released, and the gravy ran out from the cut you made in the top, and the smell that came up was the smell of 3 hours of steaming. And it was exactly what it should have been. 22p in the British Leyland Works canteen in Longbridge in 1974, with mashed potato and a ladle of extra gravy. That was the plate that kept a man going from noon until 5, without his attention flagging, and without his body telling him it needed more. The individual steaming basin required individual preparation from early morning. That is the specific labour that outsourced catering cannot perform and does not attempt to perform. When the in-house canteen went, the individual basin went with it. The steak and kidney pudding in a pub today is served from a shared tin in portion sizes. It is not the same experience, and everyone who ate from an individual basin in a British Works canteen knows it immediately. Number 10, Bubble and Squeak, Monday. Always Monday. The canteen made it from the leftover vegetables from Friday's service. The mashed potato and the cabbage and the Brussels sprouts that had been kept over the weekend, pressed together into large flat cakes and fried on the industrial griddle in dripping. Pressed together into large flat cakes and fried on the industrial griddle in dripping. until both sides were dark and slightly crunchy. 2 large cakes on a plate, with a fried egg on top. 2 large cakes on a plate, with a fried egg on top. The canteen cook who made Bubble and Squeak understood something about the economics of feeding large numbers of people that the outsourced caterer fundamentally cannot grasp. That the best meal is sometimes the one made from what yesterday left behind. That the act of turning leftovers into something genuinely good is not a compromise. It is a skill. That skill died with the canteen. Number 9. Corned beef hash. Fray Bentos. The blue and white tin. Opened with the key soldered to the base, the lid rolled back. The corned beef turned out onto the board and broken into the pan, with diced boiled potato and onion softened in dripping. Everything pressed flat and left until the bottom had formed a dark crust, then broken up and pressed flat again, then broken up once more, until every piece had some crust on it, and the whole pan was a dark, savoury, slightly crisp mass of potato and meat that smelled like exactly what it was. On a canteen plate in the Raleigh Bicycle Works in Nottingham in 1971 for 14 pence, with HP sauce available on the table in a bottle that the canteen women refilled from a catering drum every morning. The Fray Bentos formula changed in the 1990s. The texture changed. The fat content changed. The hash that could be made from it changed. And the specific institutional version, the Fray Bentos hash made in industrial quantity, on the canteen griddle for 200 men. That version went with the canteen that made it. Number 8. Lancashire Hotpot. The Works canteen version was not identical to the home version. It couldn't be. It was made for 200 rather than 5. But the principle was the same. Neck of lamb, thinly sliced potato, onion, stock, a low oven, thyme. In the cotton and engineering works of Preston and Wigan and Burnley in the 1970s, Lancashire Hotpot was on the Thursday canteen menu, or sometimes the Wednesday. It depended on the canteen manager, on the local supplier, on the price of neck of lamb that particular week. But they appeared regularly enough that the men expected it, and looked for it on the board when they came through the doors. 20 pence, with red cabbage pickled in the canteen kitchen from a local supplier. 20 pence, with red cabbage pickled in the canteen kitchen from a local supplier. The sharpness of it against the richness of the lamb and the potato. That combination, specific to the Lancashire Works canteen, specific to the 1970s, specific to a region and a time that no longer exists in any form, is gone. Number 7. Fish and chips, Friday canteen. The smell. Before anything else, the smell. Coming down the corridor from the canteen at 11:30 on a Friday morning. The smell of the fryers reaching you before you'd turned the last corner. And your body responding to it before your brain had registered what day it was. Friday was fish in the Works canteen throughout the 1970s. Not because of religious observance, though in some communities that was part of it. Because fish was cheaper than meat on Friday when the Catholic communities that staffed many Northern and Midlands factories expected it. And because the Friday fish had been the rhythm of the working week, for longer than anyone in those canteens could remember. Battered cod or haddock, whichever was cheaper that week from the fish merchant, who delivered on a Thursday, deep fried in the canteen's dedicated fryer, in beef dripping that gave the batter a specific flavour and colour. That vegetable oil has never replicated, with proper chips, cut that morning from potatoes delivered that morning and fried twice. Once to cook through, once to crisp, so that they were genuinely chips. And not the pre-frozen product that has replaced them in institutional catering. Since 18 pence in 1973, vinegar on the table, the salt cellar passed down the line, and the specific feeling of sitting down to Friday fish with the knowledge that in 4.5 hours, the hooter would go and the week would be over. That feeling cost 18 pence. That feeling has not been available anywhere in Britain since the canteen closed. Number 6. Shepherd's pie. Proper shepherd's pie. Made from minced lamb. Not beef in a canteen that was doing it correctly, topped with potato. Piped on with a large nozzle to create a rough texture to crisp in the oven. Then browned under the industrial grill until the peaks of the mashed potato were golden. And the valleys were still pale and soft and the filling underneath was bubbling. In the Rolls-Royce Works canteen in Derby in 1972, shepherd's pie was the Wednesday main. 19 pence, with peas and gravy. The peas were tinned, marrow fat. 19 pence, with peas and gravy. The peas were tinned, marrow fat. Heated in the tin liquor and served in a separate compartment of the plate. That detail, the separate compartment, was the mark of a proper canteen. The institutional shepherd's pie today comes from a catering pack reheated to temperature. The potato topping is applied by machine. The texture is consistent. It cannot require the uneven crust browned by a woman doing it since 1964. Number 5. Boiled bacon with parsley sauce, the one that surprises people. Not a roast, not a grill. Boiled, collar bacon, simmered until tender. Then sliced thick and served with a parsley sauce made from a white roux, with fresh parsley chopped into it and the cooking liquor from the bacon, so it tasted of the meat, with boiled new potatoes when in season. In the British Steel Works Canteen in Scunthorpe in 1974 Thursday special. In the British Steel Works Canteen in Scunthorpe in 1974 Thursday special. 19 pence. The men called it plain food. They were right, plain food. That specific combination of honesty and sufficiency provided by the British canteen, and what no catering operation since has felt any obligation to provide. Number 4. Toad in the hole. The batter was the thing, not the sausages. Supplied by the meat contractor. Fine, without being exceptional. The batter. Made fresh. Flour, eggs, milk, pinch of salt, beaten smooth, then rested. Browned in dripping, batter poured over while the fat was searingly hot. So it began to cook immediately, and the steam made the batter puff up. 25 minutes at high heat, the batter rising in great golden billows. The underneath crisp, the inside still slightly custardy and soft. St. Helens, 1971, Monday special, 17 pence. Crisper edges. The woman had been making it every Monday for 15 years, and knew things about that oven and batter that no recipe could convey. Number 3, bread pudding, not bread and butter pudding. Bread pudding, the denser, heavier, more serious version. Made by soaking stale bread in water, squeezing it out, mixing it with suet, sugar, dried fruit, spice, egg, and baking it in a flat tin until it was set, and dark on top and dense and moist inside, and could be cut into squares, that held their shape and were eaten cold from the pudding counter for 4p. In every works canteen in Britain that ran a proper pudding counter in the 1970s, bread pudding was the cheapest item available. It was also, in the view of many of the men who ate it, the best. Because it was honest, it said exactly what it was, it tasted of fruit and spice, and bread and nothing else, and it sat in you for the rest of the afternoon, in a way that nothing light or sophisticated or modern has ever managed. 4p. Available all day from the counter, cut to order by whoever was on the pudding section. Cut to order by whoever was on the pudding section. Wrapped in a piece of greaseproof if you were taking it back to the floor. The bread pudding square has not appeared in a British works canteen since the 1980s. Not because anyone decided to remove it, because the canteens that served it closed. And the catering operations that replaced them had no category for something that cost 4p, and tasted better than everything else on the counter. Number 2. Jam roly-poly with custard, the pudding counter on a good day. The moment you came through the doors and looked left at the pudding counter and saw the jam. Roly-poly sitting there, a thick cylinder of sweet pastry rolled around a core of strawberry jam, steamed until the pastry was dense and slightly glossy and the jam inside had liquefied and was bleeding slightly through the pastry at the ends, and you knew before you'd looked at anything else on the counter that today was going to be a good day. Custard poured over at the table from the woman with the jug, as much as you wanted, until you said when, and the custard was made from bird's powder and milk, and a little sugar, and it was exactly what custard was supposed to be. And nobody in that canteen in 1973 was interested in any other kind of custard. 17p in the Cadbury's Works canteen in Bourneville in 1972, which meant you were eating jam roly-poly with custard in the canteen of the company, that made the chocolate surrounded by the smell of cocoa from the factory on a winter Wednesday at noon, and it cost 17p, and you had 40 minutes left of your break. And for those 40 minutes, everything was exactly as it should be. That specific arrangement of things, that specific combination of food and place and time, and the woman with the custard jug, that has not existed anywhere in Britain. Since the Cadbury's Canteen modernised in the 1980s and the jug was replaced by a self-serve dispenser. Number 1. Meat and potato pie. This is the one. The meal that kept more British factory workers going than any other throughout the entire 1970s. The meal that was on the canteen counter of every major works in the North and the Midlands from Monday to Friday without variation or apology, and that the men who ate it would not have changed for anything. A short crust pastry case, thick. The kind of short crust that a professional pastry chef would consider inelegant, and that anyone who ate it in a works canteen in 1971 would consider the only pastry worth eating. Filled with diced beef, not premium beef, diced shoulder or shin, slow cooked until tender, in a thick brown gravy that tasted of stock and onion and white pepper, and potato, cut in large pieces and cooked into the filling so that they had absorbed the gravy and become part of it rather than a separate ingredient sitting alongside. The lid, the pastry lid, crimped at the edges by the woman who had crimped it. That morning the same way she had crimped it every morning for 20 years. Egg-washed and baked until golden and slightly flaky at the top and firm enough to hold when you pressed it with a fork. On the plate with mushy peas and a ladle. 20 pence in the GEC Works Canteen in Coventry in 1973. 20 pence for a pie that had been made that morning by someone who had been making it every morning for 20 years and who knew without measuring how much filling each case needed and how long the pastry took in that specific oven. That pie fed the nation, not metaphorically, literally. The manufacturing workforce of Britain, the men who made the cars and the steel and the glass and the textiles, and the bicycles and the electrical components that the country ran on. Those men ate that pie at noon in the canteen and went back to the factory floor for the afternoon and kept going. And the country kept going because they kept going. And they kept going partly because of the pie. The canteen closed. The pie went with it. And the outsourced caterer who replaced it offered a pre-packaged ginsters from a refrigerated display unit and called it lunch. And something ended in that moment that no one in charge of anything has ever admitted to ending or acknowledged as a loss, or proposed any means of replacing. It was just a pie. It was also the acknowledgement, baked in pastry every morning for 20 years by a woman whose name nobody thought to record, that the people who built this country deserved to be fed properly in the middle of the day. They did, and they were, and then they weren't. And the country has not been quite the same since. If you ever queued in a works canteen, if you remember the tray, the counter, the woman with the ladle, the price, leave it in the comments. Tell us where you worked and what was on the menu. Because those canteens and the women who ran them kept the nation going and deserve to be remembered somewhere permanent.